2026 Planning Commission meeting. We begin our meetings with a land acknowledgement. As we begin our meeting, we respectfully acknowledge that our meeting today is taking place on occupied Coast Salish land. We pay respect to Coast Salish elders, past and present, and extend that respect to their descendants and to all Indigenous people. To acknowledge this land is to recognize the history of physical and cultural genocide and settler colonialism, which continues to displace Indigenous people today. It also recognizes these lands, waters, and their significance to the resilient and wise people who continue to thrive in this region despite the consequences of displacement and broken treaties. Those who hold settler privilege in this city must work towards supporting the Coast Salish people and all Indigenous people using the various forms of wealth and privilege they reap due to it. My name is Io Alvarez, I use she, they pronouns, and I'm one of the co-chairs of the Seattle Planning Commission along with Matt Hutchins. We have a few announcements to members of the public and to visitors. First of all, welcome. We're happy to make all commission meetings open to the public, but we ask that you note that the Planning Commission does not hold public hearings. The commission is an advisory body. We provide recommendations to elected leaders that in turn make the actual decisions, and we encourage individuals and organizations to provide their comments appropriately to elected officials. This meeting is a hybrid meeting with some individuals participating remotely and others participating in person in the boards and commissions room at Seattle City Hall. We'll also start our meeting with our color grave space norms. I'd like to invite a commissioner to choose and briefly speak to one of our color grave space norms that they feel have a particular relevance to today's agenda. I can go, or I can call on someone. I can fall on the sword. Or if somebody else wants to go. I commit to look for learning and I commit to learning in public. I think both in the kind of continued conversation around centers and corridor legislation, and then especially when it comes to the MFTE program. These are things that I think are new and we're still understanding them, and I especially am still understanding them. And so, yeah, what it says, avoiding playing devil's advocate and upholding white dominant power structures, but also just learning together. If there are no amendments or modifications, I suggest we all agree to these norms. And then we'll kick off introductions. Seeing none. Okay, I'll start. And I already gave a preview. My name is Io Alvarez. I use she, they pronouns. I live in White Center Highland Park. And my day job is as a designer at Element Architects in downtown Seattle. I will pass to Matt as my co-chair if you're ready to introduce yourself.
I am. I'm Matt Hutchins. Just got here. Let's see. I'm an architect. I live in West Seattle. Let's see. Rose?
Yeah. Hey, I'm Rose Lucia. I live with some pronouns, they, them. I'm a wetland biologist and planning specialist with Jacobs as my day job. And as a Seattle resident, I'm up north and live in Springs, Northgate transition area.
Michaela Dafford, she, her pronouns. I live in Capitol Hill and I work for King County on countywide housing policy and planning.
I'm Nick Whipple. I use he, him pronouns. I live in West Seattle in the North Delray neighborhood. And for my day job, I'm a city planner on the east side. How about Rebecca?
Hi, Rebecca Brune, she, her pronouns. I live in the Whittier Heights, Crown Hill area, and in my day job, I work for Sound Transit doing transit-oriented development work. And I will pass it to Deanna.
Can't hear you for some reason, Deanna. No.
Still can't.
Well, yeah, we'll skip to someone else and see if we can get you back on. How about Margaret?
Hi, I'm Margaret Zellis. I use she, her pronouns. I live in the Fremont area, and my day job or day school is I am in law school getting ready for a career in land use law. Pass it to Andy.
Hi, Andy Dannenberg, he, him, Northeast Seattle, and I teach at University of Washington in public health and urban planning. I will pass it to Dylan Stevenson.
Everyone, Dylan Stevenson, he, they pronouns. I live in the Chinatown International District neighborhood, and for my day job, I teach urban planning at the University of Washington. Also, is Diana, your mic working now, or should I pass it on to someone else? No.
Oh, sorry. All right. If you want to go ahead and put anything in the chat, Deanna, we can read it out for you. But otherwise, I think that is everyone. Did anyone not get a chance to go? Good.
Matt Hutchins just came in.
He's here in person, so we got him at the beginning.
Okay.
Cecilia's in the lobby.
Oh, and Cecilia is just joining us. Cecilia, I know you just got on the call, but if you want to introduce yourself, we're doing introductions.
Hi, Cecilia. She, her pronouns. I live in Capitol Hill, and for my day job, I am an ADA and disability equity specialist at King County.
Thanks, Deanna. And I'll just read for Deanna. Deanna Quintanar, she, her pronouns, and she lives in Capitol Hill, and her day job is as a multimodal transportation planner.
Great. So we have two items on our agenda today, a briefing on the recently adopted multifamily tax exemption program and our continued discussion about the centers and corridors legislation, which is part of the framework to implement the One Seattle plan. But before we do that, we need to approve the February 2026 meeting minutes. I'll ask for a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved, Michaela.
Michaela motions. I'll ask for a second.
Nick seconds.
Seconds. Are there any changes or amendments to the meeting minutes? Seeing none, I'll call for a vote. All in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
Hi.
Aye.
Any opposed? And any abstentions? Great. So our upcoming commission meetings, our next Land Use and Transportation Committee meeting is scheduled for next Thursday, March 19th from 7:30 to 9 a.m. online via the Teams platform. And our next full commission meeting is scheduled for Thursday, March 26th from 7:30 to 9 a.m. And then I'm going to pass it to Olivia for announcements.
Yeah, thanks, Theo. I'll be handling the announcements bit today because Vanessa wasn't able to join us. She apologized, but she had a family emergency. So as Theo noted, this is a hybrid meeting being held both in person and via MS Teams. And I'm going to review the format of the meeting. During the meeting, there will be opportunities for questions and comments from commissioners. We will be using the chat function of MS Teams for all commissioners to join the discussion queue, including those joining the meeting in person. And I'd like to remind commissioners that the chat function is not for a substantive discussion, but rather just to be recognized to speak. A couple other announcements. One, we are now in the process of posting our openings for the commission. So for new commissioner positions to fill roles of those who are terming off. That is open until April 6th. I think Vanessa sent it around to everyone. So if you know of anyone in your network that would be a good fit, please send them our way. And it's also posted online for any members of the public. It's on our website if you just want to take a look. And that closes on April 6th. And just one other note, the city is undergoing a process to be up to date with ADA compliance, especially online with our online materials and web materials. And that also means anything that we produce as a commission. So moving forward, as we produce letters, comments, recommendations, you may hear notes from us as staff when there's comments for suggestions on format changes, and we may steer in certain directions to help make things more accessible. So just a note that that's being worked on. And so if you see changes to the website, or if we say like, oh, we maybe don't need to use bullet points here or something like that, that is why. All right, so the next piece is we are providing, we have the chance for public comment. We're providing the options to provide public comment via in person here in the boards and commissions room. You can also submit those in writing via email at least 8 hours before the meeting. Vanessa did not receive any ahead of this meeting. Or they can be offered in person, or I should say live during our hybrid meetings via the MS Teams platform. And if you're offering comment during the meeting via MS Teams, please use the raise your hand function in Teams to be recognized to speak during the public comment portion at the beginning of the meeting. And if you're dialing in by phone, please email. Today you can email me, olivia.baker@seattle.gov, to indicate your name and the phone number you're calling from so that you can be recognized to speak. And as I said, there were none received via email, so I won't be reading any out loud. And then I think I pass it back to you, Go.
Oh, it doesn't have a comment.
Oh, does Vanessa usually read that section?
No.
No.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, so now we do have a moment for public comment in our meeting. Just to reiterate, we provide public comment time in all of our meetings, but we do not hold public hearings. We are an advisory body. We make recommendations for elected leaders who in turn make the actual decisions. And the individuals who make comments to the commission should remember that the mayor and city council make the decisions. We encourage individuals and organizations to provide their comments appropriately to elected officials. If we have any members in the audience who would like to give public comment, now is the time. Please keep your comments to 2 minutes if you do have them, but I think we'll just wait and see if anyone raises their hand for a beat and then. Doesn't seem like we have public comment. Cool. So we can roll into our first agenda item, which is a briefing on the multifamily tax exemption program, MFTE. Maria Deweese is here with the city's Office of Housing to brief us on the recently adopted renewed multifamily tax exemption program. This is a briefing for our information and reference, not necessarily for comment. And this program has been renewed and suggested changes are not beneficial at this time. So welcome, Maria. We have an hour for this agenda item, and if you could leave around like 30 minutes for questions, that'd be great.
Great. Yeah, thank you. Thank you all for having me. So I work with the policy team at the Office of Housing. And over the last couple of years, my colleagues and I have worked on the reauthorization of the multifamily property tax exemption program, also called Program 7 or P7. And that was reauthorized last fall. And my colleague, Kelly Larson, is on the line, I believe. Kelly, did you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, yes, I'm here. Kelly Larson, Director of Policy and Planning for the Office of Housing. Nice to see everybody.
Thanks. Great. And so today what we'll cover, we'll talk about Seattle's current housing needs and market trends and where MFTE fits in within the landscape. And I'll share a little bit about our office's role and work on the initiative, including the whole process and key considerations and how we kind of approached it as an office. And then we'll talk about the actual policy changes that resulted. Next slide. If it lets me, it lets you. Perfect. Great. So our vision and mission at the Office of Housing is that everyone in Seattle has a healthy and affordable home. We partner with communities to create housing opportunities. We equitably invest public dollars to prevent displacement. So for over 30 years, the Office of Housing has managed investments from the Seattle Housing Levy to fund the production and preservation of affordable rental and for sale homes across the city. We also oversee key development incentive programs, including MFTE, MHA, and incentive zoning. Next slide. In addition, we administer home repair and weatherization programs. We develop policy tools and we coordinate across departments. There's a lot of intergovernmental coordination as part of our work as well. Next slide. This visual gives you a sense of who lives in city-funded affordable housing. We serve a range of incomes, primarily low-income Seattleites, including folks who don't earn income and folks who are working or earn income. childcare workers, teachers, transit drivers, regular Seattleites live in city-funded affordable housing as well as MFTE affordable housing. Next slide. Seattle needs 112,000 homes by 2044, and this need spans across the income spectrum. OH funded housing ranges from serving permanent supportive housing residents with services. Those folks tend to be extremely low income, and the spectrum ranges for more moderately low income households and includes homeownership opportunities as well for more moderate income households. You'll see on this graphic that MFTE serves a slightly higher income household in general, and there's some overlap with our OH city funded rental housing portfolio in the red box there. Next slide. In general, OH funded rental housing serves lower income households. Unfortunately, from the data that we have, the renters in both MFTE and OH city funded housing sometimes pay more than they can afford. So this visual here shows the average area median income of the renters in these different types of housing. And I think it's important to just highlight the differences between MFTE and OH funded apartments. MFTE is a voluntary and time limited to 12 years program. There is an option to extend for another 12 years. But in comparison, OH funded housing has a longer term time horizon of 50 years. There's a 50-year covenant on OH funded housing. And another difference is that OH doesn't typically fund new congregate housing, whereas we do see this built with MFTE incentives. So there's just a few differences that are notable. Next slide. In recent years, we've seen high rates of production of new multifamily housing in Seattle. And given drop-offs in building permits, we're expecting this trend to decline in the next few years. There's been increased production, particularly of studios and one-bedroom homes. And this is true in the private market as well as in the affordable housing sector. You can see that on the next slide. Studios is the yellow line there. There's been growth in that sector and one-bedrooms as well. Versus you can see more family-sized homes, 3 bedrooms, 4 and 5 have kind of been level over time. Next slide, great. Seattle's AMI has also rapidly increased in recent years due to growth in the highest income households. Median family income increased by 64% from 2017 to 2025. And this visual shows how area median income of homeowners compares to renters. So homeowners is the green line. And this income gap is twice as large today as it was in 2010. And why this matters is increased AMI, it results in an increase in the income restricted rents set by HUD. So I'm giving you all this context really to talk about the overall ecosystem and environment that affordable housing is operating in. And this is one element of it, how we set rents. Next slide. So as I said, HUD uses AMI to set income and rent limits. And we've been seeing more overlap in the income restricted rents versus unrestricted market rents as a result of all of these combined market forces. This creates some challenges with affordable housing competing or being comparable, I suppose, to private market housing. And this visual here just kind of tries to explain how that overlap came to be and just what we're seeing in terms of trends for rent and affordable housing. Next slide. And just to put this all into perspective, OH's funded rental housing, MFTE, and another program called MHA and IZ. They make up about 8% of Seattle's renter occupied housing. And the vast majority of renter housing in Seattle is unregulated private market homes. To give you a sense of the scale. So I've spent this time laying the groundwork of Seattle's housing needs and current market trends, just because it's really relevant to the MFTE program reauthorization, which takes place and takes into account all of these kind of market factors and current market conditions. Those definitely play a role in the reauthorization process. And for folks who are not familiar with MFTE, this stands for the Multifamily Property Tax Exemption. It provides a 12-year tax exemption on the residential portion of new multifamily construction if a share of the apartments are income and rent restricted. Seattle has over 7,000 MFTE apartments in service in roughly 300 buildings. And the initial exemption is for 12 years, but property owners can extend for another 12 years in exchange for new rent limits. Next slide. The state first authorized jurisdictions to use MFTE in 1995, and Seattle City Council adopted legislation in 1998 and has since reauthorized the program several times, roughly every 4 to 5 years. The program goals and purpose have evolved over time. One example of this is the target areas for development has expanded over time or changed. Different unit designations have been added, for example, CDU units. But the program has the opportunity to evolve over time to be responsive to the city's needs and for the city to make program adjustments. Next slide. The stated purpose of MFTE is threefold. It is to create new housing supply, to create affordable homes, and to affirmatively further fair housing in Seattle. Meanwhile, the city must balance these costs and benefits to ensure that the program meets its stated goals. We have the public benefit side of the equation, the affordable housing and the market supply. We've also got the public cost to consider. It's a shifted tax burden is shifted onto other taxpayers, and there is a share of some foregone revenue as well. And then all the while, we need to consider the Seattle renter who maybe lives in an MFTE home, or also taxpayers, homeowners and renters. There's a lot of stakeholders in the MFTE program. But this is why we fine tune it periodically, is to make sure that this is in balance. Next slide. So who are the key players? We have investors, developers, property managers, renters, and taxpayers who we all had to consider during the reauthorization process. And in the last couple of years, OH evaluated the MFTE program, and we met with many of these stakeholders to gather feedback and create our reauthorization policy proposals. Next slide. Some of the prep work that our office did was we initiated a report with the University of Washington to evaluate the MFTE program costs and benefits. The report is available on our website, and it takes a look, it compares the rent discount for MFTE homes, and it compares it to the tax exemption benefit to the developer to try to quantify some of the costs and benefits of the program. That report also involved in-depth interviews with the developer community, and I recommend checking it out. It's really interesting. I didn't have a slide on it here, but I'm happy to talk about it in the Q&A. Our office also surveyed MFTE renters for the first time during this process and heard from them about their experiences. That was very revealing and interesting. We heard a range of feedback, but one message that was really clear was that the MFTE program means a lot to people. A lot of them really love where they live. That was great to hear. But that also some aspects of the program are really challenging for renters. I'll talk a little more about that in a moment, but income certification is one process that's very involved for renters who live in MFTE homes. We also held 2 engagement sessions, public meetings, with developers, investors, and property managers, as well as with NIAP, so commercial real estate developers. And we did internal extensive data analysis at OH in partnership with the mayor's office and Council Central staff to create policy proposals. So they went through many iterations and the proposals were informed by the feedback that we got. Next slide. Some of the key feedback I mentioned, we heard over and over again that from the development community that development's really challenging right now. Changes to the program rent limits could help facilitate new projects. Could be that tip the scales to incentivize the development to get shovels in the ground. We also heard that unit comparability expectations could be clearer from our office, from OH. What that means is OH requires that MFTE units be comparable to the private market or unrestricted units in a building. We also heard that the city should clarify better how to set rents for standard bedroom types versus open 1-bedroom types. We're calling them alternative bedroom configurations in the legislation. This is a very common typology now built in new construction. And we set some guidance around rent for that type of housing. And then we heard from both property managers and renters in the program that the income and asset certification process could be made a lot simpler for them. Next slide. So these are some of the key changes with the new legislation. We increased the allowable rent and income limits for MFTE. We established, like I mentioned, the requirements for standard versus alternative bedroom configurations. We modified comparability requirements and distribution of homes throughout a building so that they're not all clustered on one floor. And there is a director's rule forthcoming to clarify the expectations for comparability. This legislation also incentivizes more family-sized homes by increasing the share of total units that have 2 or more bedrooms to meet the 20% unit set aside. So that increased from about 8% to 12%, I believe. And then the legislation allows renters the option to self-certify their income if they need to. Next slide. So this chart gives a comparison of Program 6 rents and Program 7 rents. AMI limits were increased for 1-bedroom and 2-bedroom homes. But you'll see overall the Program 7 rent limits are higher. And we've added the alternative bedroom category. Next slide. Another facet of the legislation is it adopted a cap on annual rent increases for P7 units. We don't have any P7 units yet built, so this will be more relevant over time when those units start coming online. But properties may not increase rent annually by more than the following, whichever is lower. Either the percent change in affordable rent limits published by OH annually, or the maximum rent increase determined and published by the state RCW. And what that means is currently the annual rent cap for any P7 units is 4.4%. And this gets updated annually. So that was adopted in the legislation. Next slide. Almost there. This legislation also allowed projects that are currently in the P6 pipeline to convert to Program 7 rules. We reduced participation fees for developers. And then another big change is in conjunction with these legislative changes, OH released an updated compliance manual and process for income certification that reduces some of the paperwork and steps required to certify to move into an MFTE unit. Next slide. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions and hear feedback. Thanks.
And we don't have anyone in the queue for comment.
We can get it started.
Oh, Nick,
Nick, go. Yeah.
Appreciate the presentation and all the information. I had a couple questions. You had mentioned incentive zoning is kind of under that umbrella or consideration with MFTE and your department. I'm curious how you go about calibrating when there's maybe an incentive built in as sort of the base. If there is a different expectation when that incentive unit is overlapping with MFTE benefits, and if there's any deeper affordability or if there's other kind of approaches that you all take.
That's a great question. I know that whichever more restrictive rent and income limit applies when there is overlapping incentive program units. But I don't know, Kelly, do you have any thoughts on that?
There is one, if you have multiple types of requirements in your project, you must meet all of those and they stack on top of one another rather than double count. There's no duplication of counting. So there are some projects that have, for example, MFTE requirements as well as MHA requirements. Those have to be met separately. So it can be quite the calculation.
Gotcha. Yeah, because I was thinking more if the incentive zoning was providing FAR increase or height increase, in theory to offset the reduction of that affordable unit. And the requirement, let's say in the code, was to set it at, 80% AMI. So then if the MFTE provisions allow that to be set at 90% AMI, I assume then the land use or whatever the code, the zoning code is what's going to govern or control what the AMI is set at. Or is there any consideration, I guess, in the double counting piece where they've gotten some kind of a lift because of the incentive units being provided? So then is there maybe a higher expectation if they later on MFTE benefit?
No, I think, yeah, like Kelly said, they just have to meet both requirements. And if there is, if one unit has both requirements attached to it, the more restrictive one applies.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then, can I have one more? That's kind of a weedy question. I was curious how parking what's the interplay with parking? If that is counted towards the rent, or if that's something that's counted separate, is it coupled?
Parking, I believe, is considered a residential improvement, so it is part of the exemption. So any residential improvements can be exempt in a building. So commercial space is not, for example.
And then when you're calculating the rent, if the parking rate is like 160 a month, is that included with whatever the rent is, or is that in addition?
No, so there are the housing cost limits affixed to an MFTE unit include utilities, things that are mandatory fees, but does not include parking, which is optional. Yeah.
We did have some debate on this topic because it is a policy choice to provide a tax exemption for parking infrastructure. And currently the city is providing a tax exemption for parking infrastructure. And then there is this separate question of paying for parking is excluded from the rent calculation. So it's an interesting debate, but we ended up landing on where we are, which does allow an exemption, a property tax exemption for the parking structure and excludes from rent a parking fee or a monthly parking payment.
And I assume though, if parking was required upon condition of tenancy, that would then be maybe change the conversation a bit on what the rent limit should be. I don't know how often that's the case.
Yeah, I can't think of a situation where it would be like where a tenant would be required to pay for parking.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So Michaela Daffern, and I work in housing for King County, and so that was a very full circle moment to see the slides that I made, that Jesse and Sophie and I made, used, and so it makes me glad that it didn't all go to waste. And so because I work in this space and because I look at the data a lot, and I think a lot about how we create kind of a stable, and predictable, and long-term supply of homes that are affordable to people at all income levels in the city. My personal perspective, not my employers, as I don't think this program is worth the squeeze, and I'm not sure it's providing the public benefit. There's like a substantial decision that we make as a city by shifting that tax exemption, shifting taxes over to that exemption. And it seems like the renewal, I mean, I know it's not your fault, but the renewal of the program didn't necessarily make the program better. It just gives me pause as to I just worry that our elected officials think they should be embracing MFT as the solution. And I really appreciated at the top of your presentation how you were trying to provide more of a balanced perspective about gaps it's filling and not filling. And so just really appreciate that honesty. And there's a couple things about the program. I was wondering if you could tell us how much of a tax shift, like, can you quantify what we're choosing to give over to developers to create these units?
Yeah, so the UW report tries to quantify this.
Yeah.
And Kelly, I'm forgetting the exact number we shift every year.
Yeah, 1 sec, I'm pulling up our annual report.
Thanks. Yeah, and the UW report found, well, there were several findings, but one of the findings was the cost benefit analysis figure of 50-cent return for every dollar of exemption, which we know that it's not going to be a 1-to-1 ratio because it's an incentive program, but I think there's debate around where the return on investment should be. And different programs over time have returned different levels of benefit to the public. So P4, for example, I think it was much lower percent return, but P6, I believe, was significantly higher. So just on average, it's about 50 cents for every dollar.
I think one of the benefits, hopefully there will be an uptake. I don't know if there will be, but because it's an incentive program, the family size housing incentive. I know that when Jen LeBret came and presented to us on the programs, we were sort of like, what else can the city be doing to incentivize this? So appreciate that policy focus. Want the group to hear that these create units that don't last for very long. And in Seattle, can developers opt out of this program still at any time?
They can. It doesn't happen very often,
Okay.
but they can. It's voluntary.
Roughly last year, how many do you think?
I don't think any. Is that right, Kelly?
It's very rare. Now it's more common that at the end of the initial 12-year period, they will not pursue a renewal for another 12 years. But yeah, it's just incredibly rare for them to exit within the 12-year period.
Because when they do, those units go away earlier than expected. And they can do that when they can collect more rents on the private. They can, when the rents collections exceed the value of the tax exemption. So you have to calibrate it carefully so that it maintains its attractiveness to the developers. But in some parts of the county, you see that one. Glad to hear it's not happening a lot. But thank you.
To share the shifted tax revenue and foregone tax revenue numbers as of 2024, $80 million of taxes were shifted from MFTE property owners to other taxpayers in the city. And for the 12-year period ending with 2024, $330 million of property tax revenue was lost. because of the timing of assessments and the value of projects brought into the tax base. So this is an issue we're trying to work on, but we have not been able to identify a solution to avoid foregone revenue entirely. We are talking with our colleagues at the assessor's office to reduce it or eliminate it. But there are other trade-offs in achieving that.
I think people hear the word exemption and they think the city just doesn't get the tax revenue, but it really is shifted onto the other taxpayers. Be clear.
Rebecca, you're next in the queue. There's nobody.
Cool, thanks. Hi, Maria. Hi, Kelly. Nice to see you. I'm curious about in your conversations with developers and kind of looking at the data over the past few years, and also considering, you know, the difficulty in development that we've been seeing, what is like the uptake rate of MFTE in these larger multifamily buildings? Is there a scale at which developers said it was useful to them or made financial sense for them? Or is that, you know, is it kind of all over the place? Wondering if we know that.
I'm gonna take that one, Kelly.
UW found that it's primarily a mid-rise tool.
Yeah.
But it is used for, you know, I think we have 5 high rises in the project right now in the portfolio. And then you have a few homeownership projects, but really only Habitat is using MFTE for homeownership. It's kind of just a little bit of an extra assistance for them to make projects move forward. There was discussion about, you know, does the city want to strive for a particular percentage uptake across the board? And we never landed on a decision on that. It was more about this balance of whether the exemption was accretive enough for developers in the time that we're in right now. And so that's how the decision was made in the end.
Great, thanks. I'm also just one more quick question. I'm curious about like seeing the rents kind of collapse in on themselves across the board in the past little bit. I wonder about like competition with other subsidized units, especially in affordable housing or LIHTC buildings versus the MFTE buildings, especially with that comparability requirement. I don't know if that's something that you track, but I'm just curious to hear your take on that. Like if we're seeing vacancy rates rise in affordable buildings, do we think those people are moving over to MFTE because they can afford like kind of a comparable rent and they're getting a better product out of that building? Or are we trying to kind of distinguish between the products created by LIHTC with 60 or 50% AMI and MFTE up at 85 and 90? And is that something that we have our eyes on?
Yeah,
Mark it right
definitely.
to Michaela.
Yeah,
Question.
an interesting finding in the UW report was that MFTE unit vacancy, while there are some outliers where buildings experience high vacancy in MFTE units, on average, the vacancy of MFTE units is comparable to the vacancy of unrestricted units in a specific building. So that was good to see. It's definitely tough when affordable housing units are competing with unrestricted units because they have more regulations on them, and the tenants of affordable housing have to go through income certification, which is a process that if they could just go rent a private market unit without all that, that makes a lot of sense if a renter would find that a little more appealing. So we're definitely tracking that as an office, and part of the reason that LIHTC homes are underwritten to that 60% limit is to maximize leverage of public investment, which makes a lot of sense. But also, if we really want to think about the long-term health and stability of the affordable housing portfolio, I think more conservative underwriting and lower income targeting would really benefit the affordable housing portfolio right now. Anything to add, Kelly?
just put a chart in the chat that we shared at council or last month that shows, production overall, production of OH funded units, of MFTE units, and vacancy rates layered on top of that. So generally, MFTE vacancy rates are a bit higher than the citywide average and than the OH funded average. It is true what Maria said as well, but we are seeing slightly higher vacancy there. I think there is a lot of competition going on in this, 55 to 70% AMI rent areas, particularly for these smaller apartments. And it will be interesting to see how this plays out over the next couple of years.
Thanks, helpful.
Michaela, do you want to read your comment out loud?
Yeah, so I was just saying that I think Rebecca was like, are they moving over to light tech units? So it's like, well, many of them are moving, or would prefer to rent a unrestricted unit because you could rent it for, in some parts of the city, for less than income restricted units. And so why would you get a unit that had less strings attached and maybe some more additional amenities, and folks would be that instead.
I'm curious, you cited the tax shift figure in the report, and then you also had in the presentation kind of the scales and trying to balance and find that sweet spot. I am curious, I guess, what that process is, how you consider that tax shift, and at the same time also change some of or I assume relax some of the comparability standards. I don't know if that relates to finishes and other sort of cost drivers that they're looking for a little more relief on. And then you mentioned also where units can be dispersed within a building, which I know is also tends to be quite controversial. They prefer to keep them low within the building. But I am curious, I guess, it feels as though my just hearing about all of this today, the balance might not have been perfectly kind of right, but I'm curious, I guess, how you all were considering that balance and what was driving it. Was it wanting more uptake into the program and just getting more units online, or just trying to spur development writ large, or what kind of the motivations were behind this balancing?
Sure. Well, I think by far the biggest lever that we can pull is the rent and income limits. And so increasing those is intended to meet the goal of housing supply, which can be at odds with deeper affordability, which is a really tricky aspect of the program. So I think the rent limits is by far the biggest policy lever. As far as all the other changes, I think the rent increase cap is a really positive for renters. And that's a benefit to them and to the public that we can't quite quantify. There are actually plenty of benefits of housing supply that are difficult to quantify that maybe the UW report couldn't quite answer. For example, there's a sales tax benefit to all the new construction. But we definitely saw with iterations of the program like P4, the benefit to the city taxpayer was lower versus P6 in the UW report. You'll see I think it was like 60 or more cents to the dollar. So there are these tweaks and adjustments we can make. And then I guess cost benefit is also really difficult to quantify if you don't have basic comparability of the homes. And so in earlier iterations of the program, there might be slightly less comparability than there are today because of how the Office of Housing has administered the program over the years, and kind of figured out that this is a challenge, the comparability, making sure that the restricted homes are equivalent in quality to unrestricted homes. I would say this P7 does slightly tip the scales more towards incentivizing supply compared to P6. But we did see very high uptake in P6 too. So it's Yeah, it's tricky. It's really tough.
And what was the time frame for P6? Do you have like when that was in effect? And then when's P8 coming? Is that the TOD bill that you all are looking at potentially for when P8 might come
That
online,
will-
the 20%?
Yeah, we will have to go back to council for that. I don't
We
remember. off the
strive for
top of my
every 4 to
head.
5 years. And P6 began in 2019, I believe.
Okay. So
Okay.
different market. For sure.
Yeah.
So there was the boom in development also, right, overall, but it was the historic largest MFTE program that we've had to date.
Rose?
Okay, and so my questions are more about general information. I'm not in housing like most of the people who have been commenting to date, so or so far. Can you speak to how this program affects geographic distribution and in specific, like with relation to equity, concerns about displacement? And are there any like known issues with the MFTE program that the team is working to resolve for the next round?
Great questions. So your first question, the UW report actually did look at this, and there are some maps in that report that show basically that MFTE apartments are built throughout the city in the areas where apartments are allowed to be built. And so we have some heat maps that show the new all MFTE developments, and there are spots where they do overlay with like displacement risk. We do need to revise the map for MFTE buildable areas. That'll also be coming in future legislation.
Right now, the map is very blunt, so it doesn't really tailor an approach by geography, and that has been part of the discussion for the future, whether we should do that or not.
So for example, in older versions of the program, it was tailored just to specific neighborhoods like the ID, versus now pretty much MFTE can be built wherever multifamily is allowed. I don't think the UW report was able to draw really conclusive findings on displacement risk and MFTE's impact on that. But one of the stated goals of MFTE is to affirmatively further fair housing. One of the interesting takeaways from that report also was that in neighborhoods where rent is higher, the public benefit is higher because there's a bigger rent discount. So there were some neighborhoods where that was really apparent. And what was your second question? Sorry.
No, it's okay. I've already been like, oh, right. Program goals. Like, are there any known issues with the program that the team's working to address as far as, building out equitable distribution and units, thinking about displacement, equity, those things?
Yeah, we do have this forthcoming director's rule on comparability. That's one thing we're still kind of rolling out. We're also really still rolling out this new income certification process and figuring out the bumps in the road there. But as far as future legislation, I think, yeah, we're still kind of in implementation phase for this P7. Comparability is tricky, especially in like a very high-rise buildings where there's like penthouse units. And so we're creating rules around that right now. That should be out this month, actually, for public comment, the new director's role.
I'm always keeping a list, of course, of items, and it will depend on, capacity and interest with electeds on the executive and legislative side about whether changes would come forward. But we do know that for sure we have to bring forward the map for reconsideration with all of the comp plan changes to make sure that we're aligned well with the comp plan changes. So this will likely be coming forward next year. We had thought we would be in 26, but as you know, things are pushed. So we're hoping to come back in 27 with a better defined map.
Let's see, so this is a statewide program, so it's implemented in many jurisdictions. Are you tracking what other jurisdictions are, how they're pulling different levers and getting different results? And what's like what, and how is Seattle's program maybe different than the pack, or are there outliers that are doing interesting things with MFTE?
Yeah, so Seattle's program is by far the largest in the state. And a lot of other jurisdictions look to us to guide them through how to implement the program and our compliance standards and things like that. We heard a lot during the reauthorization process from developers that they really like the east side jurisdiction's administration of the program. Just it's a little bit more flexible, I think, for the development community, especially the compliance standards for property managers. I wish Laura was here, Kelly, my colleague Laura.
Yeah, I mean, for example, on the east side, they also do allow an overlay of MFTE with their inclusionary zoning performance units. So that's very different than what we allow in Seattle. They think that that's a good strategy there. In Seattle, there would be serious consequences to that type of policy decision. Effectively, it would cut affordable units approximately in half, because we currently have the benefit of the inclusionary zoning as well as MFTE, whereas that's layered 1-for-1 on the east side, but it is a consideration.
But it doesn't like, they don't stack, they don't like, so that you couldn't get a deeper, a more affordable unit by layering on MFTE on top of MHA?
I think they would argue that they do. So they do achieve deeper affordability and longer lasting affordability with the inclusionary zoning. You get a longer term, and then the MFTE burns off.
Yes.
So that is, yep.
I think we have something related to.
If you were, I had just a thing related to that.
Oh, I just wanted to clarify one last thing, is the $80 million, was that across all 7,000 units? Was that annual? What was that tax shift?
That tax shift was annual for 2024 for all of the residential improvements.
Okay.
Through MFTE, yeah.
And I was just gonna note, at least in Bellevue, when there is the overlap between a mandatory inclusionary unit, if it's set at 80% AMI by code, and then they take advantage of the MFTE program, then the expectation is those overlapping units, which is typically if they do 10% at 80% AMI, 10% of the 20% the MFTE units have to be set 15% lower at so that's like a 65% AMI threshold. So those are deeper affordability that will burn off after 12 years. And then they'll be able to reset back to 80% AMI, but at least for the term of MFTE, they'll get to have that.
Right.
Because we were also dealing with the market and a lot of the pressure. We had there was the Catalyst program was decided for certain areas that took away that lower affordability requirement when layered with MFTE. So then that is more of the, you're just giving away a lot through that type of approach. So that's likely the feedback you all were getting is go that route. Don't require lower AMI levels when there's the overlap per NHA units, which was the policy, at least in Bellevue, for a number of years.
I just going to, I'm excited to see and hear more about how the income certification updates go. I have friends that live in MFT units, and I have friends that have attempted to live in MFT units and had to give up that attempt through the income certification process. And I think it's a challenging thing for a lot of folks that have like diverse income sources or are in sort of untraditional jobs to prove out that requirement. So yeah, I'm just excited to see how that plays out with the new but I pass it to Michaela for a more substantial comment.
I don't know if mine's more substantial. I was just I'm curious if you could, so I pulled up First, I love the level of transparency that OH commits to in terms of doing annual reports on your different programs. I actually read them. And so know that.
Thank you.
Like, and I think this should be a standard for jurisdictions. As we do any kind of policy implementation, is sharing information about how it's working, and let users in the public sit with that information. So on page 8 of the 2024 annual report, you have a map. And you lay out in yellow your 24-year tax exemption buildings. Can you tell me a little bit about those and how who's using the 24-year program and what do they have to do to use it?
Yeah, so that is if you choose to extend your exemption from 12 years, for another 12 years, the total is 24 years. So that's just the MFT extension option.
So
Yeah.
didn't the state give jurisdictions the ability to do a 20-year exemption?
Is that for TOD?
Just
Yeah.
TOD, okay.
Yeah. Which we haven't implemented yet.
And you will?
Yes,
With the
coming legislation, yeah. But I will say that the buildings that tended to extend, we saw kind of a trend where it was the smaller unit typologies, so CDUs and congregate buildings were more likely to extend than more standard bedroom configurations.
Those types of projects tend to have lower public benefit than other project types that have more 1s and 2s and 3 bedrooms, where you have a better rent discount that contributes to the public benefit that you achieve.
There's no one currently in the queue, but we do have close to 10 minutes for this conversation. So if anybody does have comments, and if anybody who hasn't spoken yet wants to weigh in. We can let our guests go in. Go ahead.
I have a question more for the commission and also to you. Are we planning to try and get regular updates? And if so, how can we collaborate? So maybe first to commission folk who are in the know.
Come every year.
Yeah, every year.
Okay, but maybe it's to the housing and neighborhood.
Yeah,
Committee.
I think
Maybe that's why I feel like I feel
Yeah.
informed.
Yeah, I was like, oh yeah, that's area mine, that's others in it. And, yeah, I think that housing does come pretty often and speaks on different programs. We've heard about other housing programs as they've been sort of moving into implementation.
So I guess, is there anything the full commission should be aware of as far as like upcoming work we may pursue or where commission comment be valuable?
I mean, I was just saying as an aside, and staff should correct me if I'm wrong, I believe the TOD implementation is associated with phase 4 of the comp plan.
That's a good question. I'm not sure which of the phases. I think it
It's
would
one
be
of the-
phase 4 because I think phase 3 is pretty much just the supplemental EIS
Yeah.
stuff done from council's work last fall. So
Okay.
I think it would be phase 4
So
or
that
even
would-
next year potentially.
Be a chance for us to.
Yeah.
Are there?
I don't know if there's other things from wage folks' perspective.
The other one was the updated map for MFTE areas as part of that. Yeah, it sounds like you had Jen LeBrecq as well come.
I mean, that was a Wayback Machine, right? Yeah.
Okay.
She's been on council central staff for a while now, but there used to be kind of an annual update on MFTE and NHA. From staff.
We'd be happy to do that with annual reporting. That might make sense. Our annual reports are now released June 30th. So we'd be happy to come back and do a presentation on what we've learned from our annual reports the prior year.
I also think we're interested from what I'm hearing from Rose is shaping, informing and helping decisions that might be coming in front of council. If we can be helpful in that regard, or if we have a particular like concern or issue. So I think it's a mix between like a look back and also sort of a look forward as to like what's in your work program, so we can think strategically about making sure that we're building that into our timeline if it's something that.
Yeah, and I think if it's fallen off the schedule, I'm also aware that the entirety of my experience on the planning commission, and I think this is true of others, has been comp plan, which is not technically normal. And so I think it would be great to get these sort of regular conversations back in cadence.
Sounds great.
Unless there, again, we've got 5 more minutes for this topic of discussion, but it does feel like we're kind of circling a wrap up. So I'd be happy to give some time back. 5 minutes.
Thank you.
Back to our friends
Thank
at the
you.
Office of Housing, and we can move on to our next item if that seems fair to the group. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thanks for
really
having me.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right.
The image people are showing up.
Yeah. I think just because the pulse, I mean, that, yeah, pulse it.
Yeah, I can change that. if you prefer.
No, it's a.
It's just-
Like, thanks.
Thank you. Okay, so our next item is continuing our discussion on the centers and corridor legislation currently under consideration at Senate Council. This legislation is a part of the implementing framework for the One Seattle plan passed in December. We'll be finalizing our commitments to City Council on this legislation at our next meeting, which is on the 26th of March. But today's the final opportunity for commissioners to propose new ideas for a comment letter, which John sent out yesterday,
No,
a few days ago.
I don't remember what day.
John sent it to our inboxes
I also sent it
and
an hour
an
ago.
hour ago. So everybody should have access.
You should have had it
to the
for
letter.
several days now.
Uh,
I don't know if it was Friday or Monday. I think it was Monday
Cool,
that it came out,
okay.
whatever day we're on today, Thursday.
I'm also there with you.
Yeah.
But, okay, so final opportunity to propose new ideas. Everything following this is more like grammar and punctuation. But we have an hour for this, we have an hour and 5 minutes for this agenda item. Good done.
Okay. Vanessa was going to provide some introductory comments, but since she's not here, I will just combine.
John, 1 second. Andy, is your comment about the process for the draft?
No, I have a
Letter?
comment I'm going to leave in a few minutes for teaching. So once John gives his remarks, I'd like to be the first commenter so I can get away from
Got it.
teaching. Thank you.
Andy?
Andy, just so you know, I do have about 10 or 12 slides that I was going to go through. But since you have to leave,
Yeah.
if you would like to just go ahead with your comments,
Okay.
or you could either share your comment now with the group, or I could read your comment that you sent to
Okay.
me by email.
I'll
If you'd
make
like
this
to do-
quickly. Yeah, just briefly, in reading it, it just seemed like a lot of words. And I was wondering if it could be reorganized so that it was, here's our 1 through 6 numbered concerns and each one with a suggestion to go with it. It just that when I was reading, it just seemed things were a little bit buried in a lot of words. And if we want them to respond, I thought it might be organized a little more. So that's up to the rest of the group and John as to whether you can do that. I just had to kind of dig in and say, well, what is it we're really saying and what is it we're asking? I thought that could be a little more organized, but that's my only comment.
Great. Thanks, Andy. Okay. We are going to give you 5 minutes to review the draft during this meeting, but I will just start Olivia, if you could go to the next slide. I'll just start with just a background and a reminder of where this legislation fits within the city's overall comprehensive plan framework, and as well as the timing of the commission's review of this. So just as a reminder, the comprehensive plan has been developed over the last many years. The One Seattle Comprehensive Plan and the Neighborhood Residential Update were finally adopted in December of 2025. As a reminder, this actually doesn't show up on this slide. What effectively is the Centers and Corridors legislation was released in October of 2024 with extensive opportunities for public comment. Several open house meetings across the city. The community and the commission had the opportunity to comment on the proposed zoning at that time. So here we are and we submitted a comment letter in December of 2024 on the draft zoning that was proposed way back then. So here we are in 2026. So on January 29th of this year, OPCD released the updated Centers and Corridors legislation, and that legislation has now been transmitted from OPCD, so effectively out of the mayor's office to City Council for their review. It has been stated several times that this legislation was developed during the previous mayoral administration. The current mayoral administration agreed to go ahead and submit it to the City Council, just to keep the process moving in recognition that there will be several phases of comp plan implementation, and this is really only the first phase. And so in order to keep the process moving, we have decided to comment on the legislation, knowing that it is now at City Council. City Council will pick up this legislation when they start meetings of the Select Committee on the Comprehensive Plan this month. So that's why we wanted to get our comment letter done by the end of March. So just looking at the overall timeline, OPCD came to us on February 12th. So it's exactly a month ago today. They provided us a fairly detailed overview of the legislation at that time. Brennan Staley from OPCD, I believe Rico Kirandongo came to that meeting, as well as Michael Hubner. They provided us a very good overview at that time. A week later, we had a working session at the Land Use and Transportation Committee. A week after that, we had our first full commission discussion on this legislation. We provided an additional opportunity at the Housing and Neighborhoods Committee that we were not planning on providing, and that was primarily because Director Kirandongo made himself available with his staff to answer any additional questions at that time. So comments have been allowed at least 3 commission/committee meetings. Staff took all of those comments, as well as the comments from the December 2024 comment letter, and tried to prepare a fairly concise comment letter for this legislation, for this round. So you received that letter on Monday, knowing that today would be the opportunity to review and discuss that draft letter. Today is the only time to review that draft letter because of
we've learned a lot from past commission meetings and Open Public Meeting Act. And that we are going to discourage any additional email submittals of wordsmithing, writing by committee, especially with individual commissioners sending in their wordsmithing, can create much longer and sometimes messy examples of tone and consistency, and it's really, it's not the best process from both a public-facing commission process as well as from a staff perspective. So we really wanted to get your input today on the comment letter, and any comments today will be incorporated into the current draft, will be sent out a week from now, and we will take action to approve that final letter with hopefully minimal comment on March 26th. Typically, as many of you who have been through the comment letter approval process, we limit any final discussion to if only if you can come literally with line text amendments and you are prepared to have us type them in real time. That's the only way that we can add to a final draft letter at that time. So to sum up, before we give you 5 minutes, I just want to reiterate, there's been a lot of comment already. I'm not trying to discourage, I'm just trying to frame this. This is one piece of legislation. There will be several other opportunities for additional legislation during the other phases of the comp plan. And we would really like the city council to kind of adopt this one with as little amendment pile on. The comp plan, as we saw it back in December, got really, the process got really onerous. And so we're just trying to keep this one moving and help the process. So any questions about process before we give some time for review? Rose.
Yeah, so I just want to make sure I understand what you mean by not having commissioners send you like extensive like rewrites. But I know in the past, sometimes a commissioner has volunteered to help like try to actually unify a document into it. So are we now discouraging that and just letting staff handle like tone and formatting?
Yeah.
Is that removed?
The example you're providing was on one of our independent work products.
Right.
These letters are on a little bit more of a fast track timeline. There are very few occasions where we have 3 meetings to work at full commission. That sometimes that might provide opportunities for people to submit. We just didn't have that opportunity in this case. So the draft letter that you saw earlier this week is really what we could produce within the timeline. So that's why we're discouraging people from commissioners, individual commissioners from emailing, as well as the lessons learned over the years. It can get really messy and doesn't always provide the best, most concise read for the recipients. Matt's got his head in his hands. Okay, should we do 5 minutes of review? Okay.
4:28.
Okay, go ahead. turned it off during the 5-minute review.
Oh, can everybody hear John now?
Can everybody hear me? Okay.
Thanks, Rebecca.
Just to remind city council members of, and to update new city council members on our involvement with the comprehensive plan, just to state that the planning commission has been involved with the comprehensive plan for several years. We commented on the proposed zoning changes in neighborhood centers and along frequent transit corridors, which is this effectively this legislation in December of 2024. We commented on the proposed amendment to the One Seattle Plan and the permanent legislation to implement the missing middle housing legislation part of the plan. We commented in September 2025. So this letter provides our support for the centers and corridors legislation, and reminding them that centers and corridors is one of several phases to implement the One Seattle Plan that was adopted last December. Next slide. So our first section of the letter, it's organized into four fairly concise sections. The first section is for the readers to remember the context of this legislation, stating the One Seattle Plan's growth strategy and this legislation are the result of 4 years of planning shaped by ongoing and extensive public engagement. We encourage the City Council to adopt the centers and corridors strategy without removing or reducing the capacity of any of the proposed rezones. And any modifications to this land use vision would risk diminishing the intent of the One Seattle Plan. The next section is, there are 2 slides on the section of the letter titled Lead with Equity. The centers and corridors legislation represents a significant step in addressing both housing affordability and racial inequity by making available diversity of housing throughout the city while shifting housing capacity to areas with low risk of displacement. The Planning Commission is concerned that many areas have been removed from the original October 2024 zoning proposal. Many of these changes, and those are the areas that are outlined in pink on the zoning map, are in areas of high opportunity and low displacement risk. And these changes do appear to be in direct response to negative comments from select communities that were not happy with the original proposal. So the Planning Commission, next slide. The Planning Commission is encouraging the City Council to consider all public comment in an equitable manner and not only consider the voices of those organized communities who provides criticism of rezones in their neighborhoods this late in the process. Prioritizing these late and pointed concerns at this phase of implementation would erode the shared values and equity commitments that have shaped development of the One Seattle Plan. The next section is titled Maximize Zoning in Centers. Starting with neighborhood centers are critical to achieving our vision of a Seattle where all residents live in a great neighborhood with a variety of affordable and accessible housing options within convenient walking distance to shop, services, and transit. The Planning Commission is disappointed to see amendments. Sorry, the Planning Commission was disappointed to see amendments to the One Seattle Plan that reduced the boundaries of some proposed neighborhood centers. The proposed boundaries to some neighborhood centers, and those were reduced to varying degrees within individual city council districts by those council members. The Planning Commission does look forward to the upcoming opportunities to expand the number of neighborhood centers, including commenting on the environmental analyses that will study neighborhood centers identified in the City Council's Resolution 32183 that was adopted last fall. And that would be for the docketing process of the annual amendments that will happen this year. Next slide. The Planning Commission expresses their support for maximizing the use of mid-rise 1 zoning in neighborhood centers to encourage buildings up to 6 stories, which will be more economically feasible to achieve affordable multifamily apartment buildings than the low-rise zones. The next comment is that all remaining residential parcels in neighborhood centers should be zoned for low-rise 3 to achieve more 5-story buildings, the minimum threshold for feasible development of affordable and accessible multifamily apartment buildings. And then we end that section by saying that low-rise 1 and low-rise 2 zones do not produce the density that is sufficiently affordable or accessible in neighborhood centers and should only exist outside of the neighborhood centers. The last section of the letter is related to housing along frequent transit corridors. Starting with the Planning Commission supports the proposed rezones to provide housing capacity and diversity along our frequent transit corridors. Locating housing along these corridors offers numerous benefits, including reduced reliance on cars, improved community livability, and increased economic opportunity. Noting that studies have shown that proximity to frequent public transit often leads to higher residential and commercial property values within a 5 to 10 minute walkshed, and coupling access to transit and proposed rezones along frequent transit corridors could potentially improve opportunities to generate wealth for those who may be able to purchase homes. The last slide, second paragraph in that section notes that the Planning Commission has previously expressed our concerns about concentrating multifamily housing along arterials, noting that this approach exacerbates health, safety, and livability impacts for people who live in the upzoned areas along arterials. And the Planning Commission supports expanding the proposed upzones beyond the 1 parcel on either side of arterial to allow multifamily buildings within walking distance of transit, parks, schools, and other amenities. The Planning Commission looks forward to providing input on this issue as the Office of Planning and Community Development initiates scoping later this year on its supplemental EIS for a later phase of the One Seattle Plan implementation. That's it for content. Before we get into discussion, I just want to review the next steps. So here we are today, March 12th. Any comments made today on the draft letter will be incorporated into a final draft letter. That draft letter will be sent to commissioners by no later than the end of next week, Friday the 20th. That letter will be considered the final draft, and we will have the opportunity to take action on that final letter at the full commission meeting 2 weeks from today, and it will be sent to the City Council for their consideration at the Select Committee of the Comprehensive Plan. That's it for me at this point.
Great. Thank you for writing the letter and providing that summary to the commission. So Matt's in the queue, but no one else is in the queue. So folks should start adding themselves, but Matt, go ahead.
They will be after this. Okay. I think we need to be more precise with language here in that I read this. I read the first paragraph about housing along frequent transit corridors, which lauds, concentrating density along frequent transit corridors. And then the next paragraph does, if you are conflating what kind of corridor it is, and because our frequent transit and high hazard, high traffic truck routes are the same, it's basically saying 2 contradictory things. That it's good that we've got housing concentrated on these corridors, and that it's bad that we've got to concentrate on these corridors. And so I think that we need to like distinguish between the corridor as place type, i.e. the benefit of linking together the neighborhood centers and their proximity, like reinforcing the proximity to the frequent transit. And then at the same time, making the point that in order to mitigate the hazard that is the product of these being also our high traffic, high truck, freight network, that we need to broaden the width of the corridor so as to maximize the benefit of living near transit, but not on the high traffic, high freight road. And so what I would love to have is maybe a paragraph that kind of like distinguishes between those things so that it's clear that when we say frequent transit corridor and corridors place type and also arterial, that we're meaning different things, and that we're trying to the difficult sort of discussion of like how are we going to maximize this proximity transit without maximizing the impact or maximizing the hazard. So so somehow that needs to get like sort of I think if we're much clearer about what we're talking about, and we're talking about how to balance the pros and cons of this place type, then I think we can move forward. The other thing that I wanted to just add is I wanted to reinforce in the urban center or the neighborhood centers that we also want to be like pushing not only shop services and transit, but just jobs in general, thinking about those as job centers. So I want to make sure that gets added into that first paragraph where we have shop services and transit, so that it's not just that the neighborhood centers are places that are little bedroom concentrations. They become real full service economic centers. Those are my 2 points.
Thanks, Matt. Deanna, do you want to voice your comment to Matt or question to Matt?
No, sorry, we still can't hear you.
Yeah, your audio is not working. Sorry. Deanna in the chat asks you to clarify how you're describing the narrowing. I think this is specifically in regard to the transit corridors.
Yeah, because this proposal, limits the width of the upzone to the area that gets the full brunt of the noise, vibrations, poor air quality, all the sort of livability impacts of proximity to cars and trucks. It doesn't really leverage the benefits of the proximity to mass transit. And so what I'm hoping to say is that really we recognize the benefits, that this plan has limitations, and they should jump to the next step, which is actually, studying urban design that actually makes sense to balance those two.
Mitigate. Yeah.
Yeah, typing or something. Can I just add on to this topic here at our last meeting? Brendan also pointed out that the neighborhood centers are also could be a mitigation strategy, because those were selected in part based off of their access to transit. And that is where they actually were trying to go away, they're not just along a corridor. There may be a fewer blocks deeper. Some more neighborhood centers, and the existing neighborhood centers in the next iteration that are larger are also another way for us to think through how we provide more housing options in previously exclusive places that don't reduce people's life outcomes. To be honest, I want to make sure we are saying no to housing there, but we are saying expand choice by expanding the upzone around transit stops and high frequency corridors, correct? That's
I think that's what I think you agree with this, but I think what you were saying is the centers are.
But not just the centers,
Yeah.
but really like in the future iteration, it's absolutely essential that the corridor footprint gets expanded. Because right now, it's just
Right.
half a block off of the transit corridor, and so you don't have a choice.
One person.
One parcel.
It's not a block. And then I think what Matt is saying is that the urban design along these corridors should mitigate the negative.
Well, and also broadening that. So,
Yeah.
so your choice is not
Yeah.
to live on that.
And that's what the letter says now, but it reads kind of frenetic. You're like, wait a minute, you're telling me this is wonderful, and now you're saying, now I don't think I should do it. And so I just think it needs some bridging and
Yeah.
better, like I liked Matt's suggestions because I feel like that might a lead-in statement might say like, this is a flawed strategy.
Right.
It has benefits.
And I think you can say
yeah.
because of the overlap between frequent transit corridors and freight and just high capacity vehicle traffic on these roads do a lot of things for the city right now. They have a lot of jobs. And there's a world where frequent transit lines are not on major arterials, but that is not.
And I would say like if we had a little bit of a, clarifying table setting statement at the top that acknowledges the difficulty of making these linkages because we can't separate transit from freight or transit from traffic because of how the system is set up. And I think if we flip the two paragraphs so that we kind of lead with the criticism and then say, but these are the benefits and why we should in this next phase be moving towards a broader cross section that is the corridor place type. Then I feel like we wouldn't feel quite so contradictory.
Okay, so I'm gonna read into the record what Deanna said after the things we already read. What Michaela's saying.
Can you hear me?
Oh, hi.
Hi.
Wow.
So I'm doubling down computer and phone. I think that helps. All right. Yay.
That works.
All right. So thank you all for coping with my technical issues. Yes, I think just to kind of triple clarify what Michaela was saying is what I was wanting to make sure is communicated. What I wanted to clarify on Matt's comment is that we're not saying, into Matt's point, it might seem contradictory. I think what we want to recognize the tension, right, of providing housing on an arterial and the externalities on health impacts and well-being and quality of life if you end up having to live there. And I don't think as a commission, but let's clarify that, we're saying we don't want housing on the arterial. It'll be, an option that still should be provided, knowing that it has these externalities and consequences, hoping that there's ways in which the building code and policy and maybe some subsidies we'll have to see, right? By making these buildings kind of have the double panes and filtering systems and all that, we're not actually increasing the cost of housing in those locations. So it's a delicate balance that I don't know that we've figured out what our recommendation is there, but we just want to make sure that that's noted. But what I want to make sure we're not saying is that we're not saying, the contradiction of like, don't provide housing on an arterial. We still want housing on the arterial. We just want to expand the choice and want to make sure that that choice for affordable living is provided on a 10-minute walk shed from the transit stops or corridors. Is that?
Yes.
Yeah. Is everyone in agreement with that kind of sentiment?
Yes, I think this is a starting point, but if it stops here, it's a bad idea.
It needs more
Right.
innovation.
Yeah.
Because I still think there's something about a boulevard concept or there are things we probably should be doing along arterials in the public realm also to mitigate the impacts to make those spaces, better, but
Yeah, well, and I think you suggested to OPCD, like, can the commission contribute to a conversation about like, what is TOD 2.0? What does it mean to do transit-oriented development in the city in this like new paradigm that we're implementing, which it would be great if that preceded the paradigm that
Well,
we're
and that
implementing.
involves SDOT, right? And Streets Illustrated guidance and all of those kinds of things that when developers redevelop, they're kind of obligated to upgrade, the street to the standards, right? Just like we asked them to rebuild sidewalks in a certain way, it may be that there's some of that cost that now is put on these developments to retrofit these boulevards, so to speak. It kind of ties into a bunch of different things, but I'm just saying, I don't disagree. But I think it might be outside of the zoning per se, but I could be wrong.
yeah, I just think we need more tools. We need to find ways that the city within their authority can do some innovative projects. Because I think at the last meeting, we were talking about not wanting to increase the cost of housing. And so we want to be thoughtful about what we propose as ideas. And
Right.
so I don't want us to put any of that in the letter, but
John is physically raising his hand.
I am, yeah. I really appreciate the attention to this section. This section is challenging, I will admit, and the contradiction comes through in the way it's written right now. Here we are trying to say we support the corridors concept in the first paragraph, while at the same time we are acknowledging that we have a long history of concern about the impacts of living on arterials. We have been advised by OPCD being with us the last couple of sessions that this is something that is much better addressed in the supplemental EIS process for a later phase.
Right.
And that's why the paragraph ends the way it does now. It's not saying that's all we have to say about this issue. It's saying these are our concerns. We want to engage in a much more significant discussion on this issue, and we look forward to doing that at the appropriate time. It's challenging to kind of straddle that line between saying more now and wait until then. So, Matt, I like your suggestion, maybe just some clarifying language. I'm concerned about saying a lot more in this because really the primary message is that last sentence, that we have a lot to say on this.
I think you shorten it, actually. We can get to
Yeah.
a tighter point. If we're trying not to say, it's so wonderful, it's so terrible. But if we like tighten the argument, we can shorten the letter and.
Rose has been in the queue for a really long time.
Well, it's directly relevant.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
what I've noticed in reading the letter and reading the sections is that they're very much, this is our history of our position, and then saving for the end how we actually feel. And instead, I think we need to flip that, and as the first sentence be like, we do or do not think this legislation or this does enough. We do not want to delay this. We still support. However, we look forward to the future phases so that we can address all the other things, and then add the context of the commission has been consistent in X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
I think that would make it stronger in literally every section if we state out front what our starting position is rather than leaving it to the end of each section.
I think to Andy's point at the beginning, that
Yeah.
could be like 1 or 2 sentences at the front.
Yeah.
Paragraph. And then, Deanna, do you want to give your comment out loud?
Sure, yeah. I like Rosa's suggestion to lead with where our stance is now in that paragraph. But I would start with the positive, meaning we support it. There's more to do. There's these concerns, and this is our history of stating those concerns, right? It kind of flipping it in that direction, perhaps. And maybe consider words like consider, right? Like where we're like saying there's more to come. There's there's considerations of impacts. We're acknowledging the impacts, but we strongly still, I think, support housing supply and diversity on arterials, even if it's not our ideal location, and we are expecting and hoping the city expands that choice by what, increasing that in future and to be analyzed in the EIS.
The open-faced compliments. Rose, you had additional comments.
Yeah, well, it's on the introduction, so less substantive, but again, along the same vein, I think that the first paragraph should be broken into 2 paragraphs. Let me see if with my edits how I was thinking. So between we are now pleased to submit this comment letter to provide our support, and then the sentence that starts, the centers and quarters legislation is one of several phases. I think that there should be a paragraph break, and that the second paragraph should start with the Planning Commission supports the adoption of the centers and quarters legislation without further reduction or removal of proposed rezones, and we look forward to addressing our other recommendations in future phases to set it up, or something along those lines. So again, leading with our position rather than waiting for the remember the context section to state that.
You dropped that text in the chat here, John.
Yes. Okay, hold on, let me think
Just
about it.
So Rose, I got you're talking about breaking that into 2 paragraphs.
Yeah, and it's basically taking the first sentence of the remember the context section,
Okay.
with some minor revision and instead moving it to be the start of that second paragraph.
And they're gonna put it in the chat.
Okay.
Great. Cecilia, are you typing to get in the queue? Because I can give you a shortcut and just call on you.
Okay, I was like trying to, I was like mid-typing, but also trying to consolidate my thoughts. I just wanted to go back to the last section and not to go against Deanna's points, but to me, part of the reason why we support housing on quarters, we support more housing, but also part of why we support the housing that is laid out in this corridor legislation is because we have heard and are hoping that there is more legislation to come to expand beyond the half a block or whatever, like measly amount of upzoning we're allowing. And so I think that that's important to lead with, that like we are supportive of this because we are expecting more legislation to come that will build upon it. And I just don't want that to get separated because I don't want it to be misconstrued of like we support this legislation and then make it seem like a bonus that we are also supporting more legislation to come, because I feel like our view of this is like based on the fact that we're hoping new legislation.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that. We've heard it been said in a public meeting, so reported on by the urbanist. But until it happens, we're kind of tentative.
It's all political.
Yeah.
If we move, if some of these decisions get pushed out to another election.
Right. You're technically in the queue with your last.
Okay. If we're gonna keep it, I don't know if we're gonna keep it if we rearrange the maximizing the neighborhood. Sorry, no, one around. Yeah, that's the right headed. No, housing along frequent transit corridors, but in that paragraph, it talked about
Which paragraph?
first paragraph of housing along frequent transit corridors. There's a statement there about Building opportunities?
Yeah, the very last.
I'm not sure I understand that because wealth building opportunities by and large are when you can are created through a housing typology that is not typically found in multifamily buildings. You don't build a lot of condos. And so I think that's a overreach, because we're not creating like townhomes and like smaller, affordable, like, units or, standalone opportunities. And so
I'm trying to go back to, I think in our housing neighborhoods commission meeting, they talked about expecting townhomes to be a part of the development pattern. Which I think is maybe what this is in reference to.
along corridors under the zoning they're proposing, the MR2.
Yeah.
Well, but I mean, I think it's adjacent.
Yeah.
These last two sentences came out of a discussion at LUT, the Land Use and Transportation Committee. There was discussion of the paragraph that talks about the studies have shown that proximity of frequent transit leads to higher property values. And so that sentence came out of that meeting. And then the final sentence also came out of that discussion as that discussion at LUT evolved.
These are gonna be like, my understanding of what's gonna get built are buildings that will be owned by equity investors who buy a multifamily building and operate it. And so the residential wealth generation, I think, would be not for individual homeowners unless you're adjacent to those areas.
Can I chime in? That was because that was my,
Yeah, I was gonna
Oh.
point to Deanna.
Go.
Deanna, I was just gonna point out that you had shared a study that
right.
maybe several. Yeah.
And it was more, and maybe Michaela's right, this was more kind of associated with like the 10-minute walk, like once it expands, right? It's gonna try to upzone, and not necessarily the only type of buildings that we're gonna try to see come up is, these multi-family, apartment complexes. Like, so whatever other housing types happen within that rezone, right, create that opportunity. So that's more what I was saying. And or we could see, for-profit development, right, that could then, create different types, right? What I'm saying is you're right, and it doesn't apply solely, it applies more in the context of the 10-minute watershed expansion of the upzone that we're talking for later. So in that case, we might want to exclude that topic out of this because it's kind of not quite where we're headed. It's more for the later.
I think in the context of the point that Cecilia was making about the conditionality of some of the support on
Mhm.
The anticipated future stuff, I feel like restricting our comment in this letter to what is actually going forward feels like a tighter letter to me personally, but open to others with comment. Rose, I know you.
Well, it's related.
Yeah, Rose, and then Matt, and then Margaret has a comment on Rose's comment on the intro paragraph, and Nick is in the queue.
On the same paragraph, by the way.
Okay, so maybe
Table of
Nick
attention.
and then Margaret.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And so just to provide comment on the LUT meeting, that came out of observing that there was numerous public comment about various folks being concerned about the effect of the proposal on their property values and therefore advocating to further reduce. And we were trying to provide context to be like, well, actually studies show that there can be an increase in property value and opportunities to generate wealth.
And it was
So,
figured that there's always a counter argument.
Yeah, so that's some context for like how that came up in LUT and why we thought it was important to add.
Got it.
They're currently on. Generating.
Yeah.
So Michaela, your comment was specifically on the last sentence.
And
I shouldn't probably editorialize on what should and shouldn't be in the letter, but I don't think that affects the letter by removing that sentence.
My comment associated with that is, it's just that we're talking about the preponderance of new housing that's going to get built along the corridors in a close proximity is going to be probably ownership townhouses. And therefore, there is a wealth building aspect to that. So I don't know, as opposed to just being, so if that sentence somehow talked about like that opportunity, was specific about it, I think then you would tie together the idea about wealth creation and ownership with regards to the zoning.
is the idea that there's just not enough large scale developable land to do a multifamily building, so it's most likely going to be infill?
It's generally that,
It's gonna be too difficult.
well, I think that like right now the corridors are lots of LR1 and LR2, some LR3.
The proposal is largely LR3.
Is it largely?
But what they're adding.
I think that in general, we're still gonna see people do townhouses even in LR3.
Especially in the context of
Okay.
NR3 to LR3 being the zoning change.
I was not envisioning that being represented.
But I think it depends on where the zoning change is happening, right? Like some of it's contextual. In neighborhoods where there's already more density, like in close proximity to neighborhood centers or urban centers or regional centers, like maybe it'll be something different.
Yeah.
But elsewhere.
I think there's a lot of opportunity to save some of this discussion for the next substantive time we comment on this topic. So maybe the intent that was shared earlier to tighten this section up, maybe we don't go into such detail on this.
Nick, do you still want to give your related comment or can I?
Not, it's in the same paragraph, not totally related, so it's in the same.
We're on that page.
We're on that page, so I'm gonna say Nick and then
Okay.
Margaret, you're still.
Yeah, and it's pretty simple and maybe nitpicky, but the third sentence, I believe, the transportation is the second largest household expense for most Americans after housing. It just, Americans just feels like a less precise term to use because the context is around the stat referring to households that are located in the US, not specifically to people who hold US citizenship.
Yeah.
So I would just offer transportation is the second largest household expense for most US households after housing. Get a lot of housing, house and that, but I'll drop that friendly amendment there.
Appreciate that edit. Okay, Margaret. Sorry that.
Okay, yeah.
Second.
No worries. Can you hear me all right?
Yep.
Okay. Back to the conversation about the introduction, and I would echo a lot of what Rose said, but I was also wondering if instead of leading with this background context, it led with the conclusion of the introduction first. So the first sentence of the remember the context, and then followed by where it's the centers and corridors legislation is one of several phases to implement the plan, and then followed by the background context. Because I felt like the background context, the last sentence before the centers and corridors legislation is a nice conclusion to the introduction. It was just something that stuck out to me kind of throughout the letter, is that it builds really well upon itself as it goes, but it doesn't necessarily put the conclusion of what I'm trying to gain from each section up front. That would have been, I think, helpful, especially if like you were to only read the first paragraph. Having all of that right there would make a lot of sense to me. But then I had another really, really random specific comment about, it's on the second page in the first paragraph, halfway through the first paragraph. All is underlined to add emphasis, but then we also have underlining for hyperlinks and underlining for subsection headings. And I would suggest if we could maybe do some sort of alternative so that it doesn't look like that all is hyperlinked to something.
Italicized.
Cool.
Is that compliant, like?
Oh,
is-
yeah.
with
I think the accessibility stuff is.
That's a
actually
different subject.
Oh.
That's to go to Andy's comments, that can be challenging to,
Can we do italics?
All caps.
Yeah.
oh, no,
We can do it, yeah.
can we do it italics or
And I
can
have
we
a
somehow?
comment on things that maximizing the extenders and the program.
Okay, can I just ask Margaret for clarification? Margaret, your first set of comments about the first paragraph, can you kind of repeat your recommendation on how to rearrange those two,
So
what is
I
now
see it,
paragraphs?
the three like different parts I've identified are, it's the start of the letter up until the about 2/3 of the way down the first paragraph. The second part would be the centers and corridors legislation. So those are two separate parts, kind of breaking that paragraph in half. But then taking the first sentence of the remember the context and placing it in front of the centers and corridors legislation is one of the several phases to implement.
Yep.
And then putting that entire subsection or that section in front of the background information. So that way it leads with the Planning Commission supports the adoption of this legislation. Then it continues on to the centers and corridors legislation is one of several phases to implement the One Seattle plan. Paragraph break. Then there's that background context. Because then it leads with our support and then follows with this like history of supporting and history of providing comment on this. And I thought that at least like the background section, the first part of that introduction paragraph up until 2 sentences before it finishes. This is hard to talk about without a visual, I'm sorry. To show you, I think that there's the last sentence that's in like the very middle of that introduction paragraph. It says, we are now pleased to submit this comment letter to provide our support for the centers and corridors legislation. That would be a really great way to end the introduction paragraph. And that way there's like a conclusion at the beginning and the end with an explanation in between. Does that make sense?
Well, regardless of that, would it be helpful if Margaret provided an edited text? No.
No, we've got it. I'm just gonna rationalize the way it's written now. I'm totally fine with a couple things. And again, this is not my decision. Historically, we have started letters with, instead of going all out and saying who we are, but saying, in this particular case, the Planning Commission is the stewards of the comprehensive plan, and we have been involved with this process for several years. That is why this letter started that way, to remind existing council members as well as new council members that we've been involved with this process over several rounds. So I think it is important to capture that. Where that goes is not as significant. So I think it can be arranged just as long as it flows, and I can work with that. Rose?
I support Margaret's proposed edits, because frankly, I've always found it a little hard in our letters every time we start with as stewards. And so I'm like, yes, new, fresh idea and how to shape that up. I love it.
Yeah. Well, I think two people have effectively made the same suggestion.
Not everybody reads past the first page, and if it's just a bunch of, if all we get their attention on is a context thing where we're not really stating our position, we're missing an opportunity to focus their attention on what we want them to hear.
Can we just do time check?
Yeah.
We were originally only scheduled to go until 5:15,
I'm sorry.
but that's up to the chair.
If folks are okay with sticking around a little longer, then I can stay.
5:30.
To 5:30 is, for folks online, is 5:30 acceptable? Understanding if people need to drop off. Not really registered. Okay, Deanna's saying yes. Cecilia has to hop off. Rebecca's typing. Do we lose quorum?
We're
We're not
not
making
taking
any
any
action.
action.
Okay, so it doesn't matter. Okay, if folks are able to stick around, it's appreciated. Matt and Michaela, y'all are in the queue, so.
Just a really, not to be a dead horse, but I would just, I share well, I would just want to say, like, as stewards of our city's comprehensive plan, the Seattle Planning Commission supports ... and just skip all the rest, just excise it. They can go to the website, and see our long history.
Okay, brilliant.
Right, so that's it.
Move to the long history.
Counterpoint.
I'm kidding, that's not a real.
I like that we leave it in because we had acknowledged that there are new council members who are coming up to speed for the first time. So.
And those letters are significantly more detailed. Than
Okay.
I mean, I think it is like, the commission exists to provide advice and comment on the comprehensive plan that's in our charter, right? It's not, never mind, I'm lying.
And to Michaela's point, if they're not even going to read one page,
Right.
they're not going to go to our website
Yeah.
and look for these letters.
Yeah. I think it's useful to give them, but again, the order of like offering. Michaela?
Okay, I'm dropping two, just hopefully they're easy, folks. The first one is easy. At the end of the letter and the last substantive paragraph before we close out, we say we will look forward to, and I just think we should say we look forward to. Struck me as like a. And then the more substantive.
Sorry,
one-
so you're saying the planning commission looks forward to?
We do. It's just that we're hopeful. The other one is in the maximize neighborhood center zoning on page 3. And this is just kind of more wordsmithing. There's not proposing kind of any changes in intent. Just wanted to tighten up the language. Sometimes the letter feels like y'all were doing your job of making sure you were capturing comments. And there might have been a variety of different comments from people that were put into the same paragraph. And it just, sometimes it just doesn't feel like the right linkages were there. So the exclusion statement at the end kind of felt like, wait, but we didn't tell them why it does this. So this is just saying the planning commission has consistently and strongly supported the creation of neighborhood centers to evolve Seattle's growth strategy and complement the system of regional and urban centers that has been in place since the city's first comprehensive plan in 1984. Neighborhood centers are essential to realizing our vision of a Seattle where all residents live in a great neighborhood with affordable and accessible housing options within a convenient distance to shop, services, and transit. Implementation of this new model is also a critical step towards addressing the impacts of racially exclusive and discriminatory housing and land use practices by creating more housing options for more people in more areas. It does not, though, address Matt's suggestion that it needed to include jobs.
That's okay.
Okay.
So Michaela, are you basically replacing
The paragraph.
I was just adding.
the middle, if this is the middle paragraph of that section?
The first paragraph under the maximizing heading.
Okay. Are you prepared to submit that in writing?
It's in the chat.
Okay. And so literally replace the whole paragraph?
I mean, I did redline edits, and so I was just tinkering with sentence structure for some of it. And so it's roughly the same but different. So I just
Okay.
thought it would be easier.
But it's the whole
Yeah,
paragraph. Okay. I will look for that.
okay.
Don't believe there's anyone else in the queue. But this meeting is good.
Maybe it'd be helpful. Does anyone have any comments about Michaela's edit? Because we try not to unilaterally just
Yeah.
let somebody. So just anyone have any comments about that proposed revision?
I just have some suggestion to staff, if you're given any opportunity to shorten, tighten up the header, you can feel free to shorten that paragraph, you know. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think in our previous comment about putting first start position and then putting second our history of that position, that might move around. Yeah, I think so. Coordination there. But I generally support the edits. Anyone else has any comments on Michaela's? Like those were the only two names. Also, end 9 minutes earlier from the late time that we said we were gonna end. Not 6 minutes late. Not 6 minutes late, but 9 minutes early. Well, glass half full. No, but in all seriousness, if anybody else has any comments on the letter, this is our last chance to provide substantive comment, and so even if you want to sit for a few minutes just to make sure that nothing has fallen by the wayside amidst other conversation that we've had today.
I just have a question. Michaela, you said that
Yeah.
your revision does not include Matt's suggestion. Do you want it? Matt, would you want that to be in her revision?
I wasn't fully listening because I was getting a drink, so. I don't know how it would fit in.
Adding jobs to the list of.
Is that because we mentioned several times in the letter what kind of is included in the definition of center? Is it your preference or is it the
Yes.
commission's preference that every time that kind of standard list of things, does that always include jobs, shops, services, transit, and jobs, or in whatever order?
That's an employment settings, so I think right now it's just focused on the benefits of creating housing options close to those things.
Whoa.
You were talking about creating jobs.
As a counter, services and shops are jobs.
Yeah,
Like that's a perspective of somebody who is consuming those things, but people work in those spaces.
and the reason to say, I think, jobs explicitly is because then there's a broader section. Because yes, there's like people who work in jobs. It's not, I guess, yeah, services, but I guess eventually I'd like to get to like just a vision where these where the neighboring centers have their own really kind of commercial, like that is not just bars and restaurants, you know, that it has other commercial drivers at a small scale that are entrepreneurial, that like, yeah. So that was kind of my thought there.
I would support including jobs because we've also had a theme in past meetings of wanting to address commercial opportunity. So,
Okay, so
yes.
Yes. If you can fit it in, such find a way to fit it in.
four letters. With a comma.
by increasing housing options around those areas, you make those business districts more viable because you increase the customer base.
Okay. It sounds like we're wrapping up.
Yeah, I think we're cycling around.
Okay.
So, are there any final comments from staff?
No, we will incorporate your suggested comments. Thank you for the many rounds of comments on this. Comments will be incorporated next week. You can expect a letter by the end of the week. And we will take action on it 2 weeks from today.
And there's no like we should not be sending things. This is it.
It is
We're
discouraged.
just procedurally voting on the letter when we walk into the meeting.
Yeah, I think Zio is asking about between now
Between
and
now and when we get the next draft, this is the conversation today. And
nobody can prevent anybody from.
Zio's gonna try.
But you would prefer that we not.
Vanessa used the word discouraged today.
Yeah. Okay, just
on
stating
the
it.
I'm just sharing the word that she used.
I think we've said it 3 times in the meeting.
It was not prohibited.
Yeah.
It was discouraged.
Just great. Okay.
You still could.
That's like typing in here.
I've said what I said.
We should adjourn. Okay, thank you, everybody, for staying on a little later. Thank you, staff, for all the hard work that went into crafting this and the further hard work and then incorporating everything we talked about today. But see y'all next time, folks online.
Bye.